Something extraordinary is beginning. And if you dismiss the coming days as just another routine astrological change, you may overlook one of the most powerful turning points the sky has offered in years. The next 7 days are not simply about the sun entering a new zodiac sign. They mark the release of an enormous concentration of cosmic momentum that has been quietly gathering strength beneath the surface for weeks. Most people will move through this period without recognizing what is unfolding around them. Yet, if you had been paying attention to the strange tension building inside your own life, you have already felt its approach long before it became visible. Today, the sun enters Leo, and while many people will describe that as nothing more than a seasonal transit, the deeper reality reaches much further than a simple movement across the zodiac. Everything that has been developing behind the scenes throughout this month is reaching the moment where it can no longer remain hidden. Every delay that tested your patience, every obstacle that forced you to question yourself, every experience that made you feel ignored, overlooked, silenced, or as though your efforts disappeared into empty space during the past 3 weeks, was never meaningless. None of those experiences arrived by accident. They were preparing your inner world for a dramatic reversal, and the pressure that has seemed to rest on your shoulders without relief is approaching a point where it changes direction with such speed that the emotional shift may feel almost impossible to process. Yet there is something even more important that deserves your full attention. Hidden inside this week is one specific day that very few people are discussing, even though it carries what could become the most fortunate opening of the entire year. Later, we will explore exactly when that day arrives and why its timing carries such extraordinary significance, because understanding that moment may completely change the choices you make. Until then, stay present with this message. If you have been waking each morning with an unexplained heaviness, if your body has felt exhausted before the day even begins, if it seems as though an invisible burden has settled across your chest and no logical explanation has been able to remove it, there is a reason for those sensations. They are not simply emotional fatigue or ordinary stress. They are deeply connected to the energetic transition unfolding this week, and once you understand that connection, many of the confusing experiences you have been carrying will suddenly begin to make sense. Right now, you stand at the edge of an important threshold. Once you move beyond it, returning to the version of yourself that existed before this period will no longer be possible. July has not been a comfortable month, and perhaps that was never its purpose. If it has felt as though life itself has been pressing against you from every direction, your perception has not been mistaken. The entire month has surrounded you with extraordinary pressure, almost as though you have been sealed inside an environment where every emotional weakness, every unresolved fear, and every hidden uncertainty has been compressed until it could no longer stay buried. Since the very beginning of July, Mercury has been traveling in retrograde through Cancer, drawing your thoughts backward through emotional uncertainty, misunderstandings, unfinished conversations, and decisions that refused to settle into clarity. Words were misunderstood. Plans that seemed simple became unexpectedly difficult. Conversations drifted away from their intended meaning. Situations that should have required little effort suddenly demanded far more energy than expected. Yet Mercury was only one piece of a much larger pattern unfolding above you. On July the 6th, the Sun formed a square with Saturn, creating an atmosphere where forward movement seemed to encounter invisible resistance at every turn. Progress slowed. Authority figures appeared to challenge your direction. Opportunities seemed to close before they could fully open. You may have felt as though no matter how much determination you brought into your daily life, something continued pressing against your momentum, refusing to allow easy success. That was Saturn, examining the strength of your foundation, ensuring that the structure supporting your ambitions could withstand the greater responsibilities waiting beyond this period. Only 1 day later, Neptune stationed retrograde, and with that reversal came another profound layer of transformation. Neptune does not simply reverse direction without consequence. When it turns inward, illusions begin to dissolve. Comfortable stories lose their ability to protect you. Emotional shelters built upon wishful thinking begin to collapse. The explanations you repeated to yourself in order to avoid uncomfortable truths become impossible to believe. Dreams that once appeared certain reveal the places where imagination quietly replaced reality. That process is painful because it requires you to release identities, expectations, and futures that never truly belonged to you. The discomfort was never evidence that something had gone wrong. It was evidence that something false could no longer survive. Every moment of confusion, every delay, every emotional weight, every illusion stripped away was participating in a larger preparation. None of it represented punishment. Instead, the universe was clearing away everything that could interfere with what is preparing to emerge. Before something meaningful can rise, the path ahead must be free of unstable foundations, false expectations, misplaced attachments, and directions that no longer belong to your future. During these past 3 weeks, the cosmos has been removing exactly those obstacles, even when the process felt frustrating or unfair. If you have felt as though every step required twice the strength it normally would, if progress seemed buried beneath invisible resistance, understand that this experience is reaching its conclusion. Today, the energetic structure of the heavens undergoes a complete transformation. Today, the sun returns to the place where its nature expresses itself with complete authority. The sun enters Leo, and this moment represents far more than another routine movement across the zodiac. It marks a rebirth. Leo is the natural home of the sun, the place where its vitality, confidence, creativity, and life force operate without limitation. During the previous 4 weeks, while the sun traveled through Cancer, your awareness was drawn inward. Emotional healing became unavoidable. You were encouraged to retreat from constant external activity and instead confront feelings you may have ignored for much longer than you realized. Hidden wounds demanded acknowledgement. Old emotional patterns surfaced for examination. Quiet reflection replaced outward expression because something inside you needed attention before your energy could move forward again. That inward season now reaches its conclusion. As the sun leaves the waters of Cancer and steps into the fire of Leo, the atmosphere does not simply become different, it comes alive with unmistakable force. The movement carries you from emotional protection toward authentic self-expression, from retreat into visibility, from remaining hidden within familiar shadows toward allowing your presence to be witnessed by the world. Imagine standing inside a room that has remained dark for so long, your eyes adapted to the absence of light. Then the door suddenly opens, and brilliant daylight floods every corner. At first, the brightness feels overwhelming, but within moments you realize nothing about you has changed. Only your ability to be seen has. That is the doorway opening today. And as this new chapter continues to unfold, what comes next will reveal why this shift has been preparing you for something far greater than you may have imagined. There is one reason this moment refuses to resemble any ordinary year, and if you only focus on the fact that the sun has entered Leo, you will miss the extraordinary chain of events that has already been set into motion. Imagine opening the door to a stage where every light has already been turned on long before the audience arrives. That is what the heavens look like now. The sun is not stepping into an empty landscape. It is arriving at the center of an energetic design that has been assembling itself piece by piece throughout the entire month, preparing for one of the most concentrated periods of cosmic activity seen in recent years. The true story does not begin with the entrance of the sun itself. That moment simply unlocks everything waiting behind it. What follows during the next several days is where the deeper transformation truly begins to reveal itself. And once these events begin unfolding together, it becomes impossible to separate one from another because every movement in the sky supports the next. like perfectly aligned gears inside a single extraordinary machine. On July 23rd, something changes that many people will notice before they can even explain it. The mental haze that has surrounded so many decisions begins to dissolve, and after weeks of Mercury moving in retrograde, traveling through emotional territory that blurred judgment, delayed answers, complicated conversations, and left countless choices suspended in uncertainty, Mercury finally stations direct. The difference is not subtle. It feels as though someone quietly opens a window inside your mind after weeks of breathing stale air. Thoughts that seemed trapped inside endless repetition suddenly organize themselves. Questions that refuse to produce clear answers begin resolving almost effortlessly. Conversations that circled endlessly without reaching understanding finally move toward resolution. Messages that remained unwritten because the right words never arrived suddenly become easy to express. Plans that seemed frozen begin moving once again, not because circumstances magically changed overnight, but because your ability to recognize the correct direction finally returns. Yet clarity alone is only part of the gift arriving at this moment. What follows is momentum, and that momentum carries extraordinary force because Mercury is not acting alone. It is now moving forward beneath a sun that has already entered Leo, the place where the sun expresses its greatest strength without restraint. Together, these two movements create an effect that resembles a tightly stretched slingshot, finally being released after holding enormous tension for far longer than expected. Everything compressed during Mercury retrograde begins expanding all at once. Delayed opportunities no longer wait quietly in the background. They surge forward. Projects abandoned because progress became impossible suddenly recover their rhythm. Decisions that felt unreachable become obvious. The energy does not simply return to where it paused. It moves beyond that point with remarkable speed, allowing you to recover lost ground and then travel much farther than you believed possible. What seemed like wasted time reveals itself as preparation for acceleration. Yet even this powerful release is only another doorway leading towards something even greater. 3 days later, another major turning point arrives, and the atmosphere changes once again. July 26th becomes the day when pressure that once seemed permanent begins to lose its hold. On this date, Saturn stations retrograde in Aries, and understanding the meaning of this movement changes the way you experience everything surrounding it. Saturn has long represented structure, limitation, responsibility, authority, and the invisible weight that demands patience before progress can be earned. While Saturn moves direct, its influence often feels external. Rules appear stronger than your intentions. Systems seem to resist your efforts. Authority figures create delays. Closed doors remain firmly shut despite repeated attempts to move forward. It can feel as though every step requires permission from forces beyond your control. When Saturn stations retrograde, however, the direction of that pressure begins to transform. The burden no longer pushes primarily from the outside world. Instead, the emphasis shifts inward. External resistance gradually softens. Obstacles that once appeared immovable begin releasing their grip. The gatekeepers who once seemed impossible to satisfy lose their ability to dictate your direction. The limitations do not disappear completely because Saturn never abandons discipline, but discipline becomes something you claim from within rather than something imposed upon you by circumstances outside yourself. Responsibility changes ownership. Your progress depends less upon external approval and more upon the strength you have quietly developed during the difficult months behind you. For those who continued building despite uncertainty, continued believing despite disappointment, continued showing up despite invisible progress, this moment carries profound significance because the endurance demanded earlier now begins revealing its purpose. The walls that once defined your limits begin falling away, and beyond those barriers waits the very future you continued preparing for, even when there was no visible evidence that your efforts mattered. Still, the importance of July 26th reaches even deeper because Saturn is not the only celestial force changing direction that day. At the very same time, the lunar nodes shift signs, opening another chapter that reaches far beyond individual circumstances and into the larger spiritual current shaping collective evolution. The North Node enters Aquarius, while the South Node enters Leo, marking one of the most meaningful energetic transitions of this entire period. The lunar nodes do not change signs frequently, and whenever they do, they redirect the path of growth across approximately the next 18 months. This transition carries an unmistakable spiritual invitation. The South Node entering Leo signals that an older identity has reached the end of its usefulness. The version of yourself that searched for approval, depended upon recognition, performed in order to receive acceptance, or measured personal worth according to external applause, no longer belongs to the future opening before you. That chapter quietly reaches completion. At the same time, the North Node entering Aquarius begins drawing your awareness toward a higher expression of individuality. You are invited to become fully yourself, not for admiration, but for meaningful contribution. Innovation becomes more important than performance. Authenticity becomes more valuable than popularity. The light you are preparing to express is no longer centered upon proving yourself to the world. Instead, it emerges naturally because your truth can no longer remain hidden. The transformation approaching you is therefore not a return to who you once were. It is the arrival of the person who existed beneath every layer of fear, expectation, and borrowed identity all along. Suddenly, the emotional weight carried throughout the beginning of July reveals an entirely different meaning. Those difficult weeks were never designed merely to delay your progress. They served as a process of purification, removing what no longer belonged before something stronger could emerge. Just as a living being cannot continue growing without shedding what has become too small, your spirit also required the release of an outdated version before embracing what comes next. Now, every major movement begins aligning at once. The Sun ignites the fearless vitality of Leo. Mercury stations direct, restoring clarity and forward movement. Saturn retrograde shifts the burden of limitation away from external resistance. The lunar nodes redirect destiny toward a new evolutionary path. Together, these developments place you at the entrance of an entirely different timeline, one that feels less like a gradual improvement and more like crossing an invisible border between two completely different chapters of your life. Yet even after all of these remarkable events, the most extraordinary moment has still not arrived. Earlier I mentioned that one day this week carries extraordinary importance, despite receiving almost no attention. That moment is July 29th, and its significance cannot be overstated. This is the opportunity hidden within everything that came before it. The cosmic alignment unfolding on this day is so exceptionally favorable that allowing it to pass unnoticed could mean overlooking one of the greatest openings available throughout the entire year. On July 29th, the Sun forms an exact conjunction with Jupiter in Leo. Jupiter, long recognized as the great benefic, the celestial symbol of abundance, expansion, fortunate opportunities, blessings, and remarkable possibility, joins perfectly with the Sun, while the Sun stands in the Zodiac sign, where its strength reaches its fullest expression. This is not merely another alignment among many. It is the convergence of life force and limitless expansion at one of the most empowered positions available in the heavens, preparing the stage for everything that follows. Do not mistake what is approaching for ordinary good fortune, because this is something far greater than a favorable transit appearing on an astrology chart. Imagine every barrier that once stood between you and your future beginning to unlock at the same time, almost as though the universe has quietly removed every obstacle before asking a single question. Will you have the courage to step forward when nothing is left to hide behind? That invitation is exactly what this period represents. Yet before you can reach the extraordinary blessings waiting ahead, one final test stands between your present reality and the future preparing to unfold. On July 27th, the Sun forms an opposition with Pluto, and Pluto has never been associated with easy passage or effortless transformation. Pluto governs profound change, hidden truth, psychological depth, and the uncomfortable process of releasing everything that no longer belongs. As the Sun stands opposite this immense force, you are asked to confront the parts of yourself that have quietly shaped your choices from the shadows. Every attachment to control, every fear disguised as protection, every pattern of manipulation, whether directed toward others or toward yourself, rises into full awareness. This is not meant to punish you. It is the final purification before the breakthrough arrives. The identity built upon appearances cannot accompany you where you are going next. The version of yourself that depended upon performance, approval, or carefully managed images must be left behind. Only what is genuine can continue beyond this point. That is why this opposition feels so intense. It strips away illusion one final time, so that when the extraordinary opportunities of July 29th appear, they are received by your authentic self, rather than by an outdated identity struggling to survive. The remarkable part is that this challenging passage does not stand alone. On the very same day, the heavens offer an entirely different current of energy, alongside Pluto's demand for transformation. The Sun forms a trine with Neptune, while also creating a sextile with Uranus, and together these harmonious connections begin opening inner doors that may have remained closed for a very long time. Your imagination expands beyond familiar limits. Your intuition becomes unusually precise, allowing you to sense possibilities long before they become visible in the physical world. Inspiration arrives without warning, often appearing so suddenly that it feels less like thinking and more like remembering something your soul already knew. New ideas emerge, carrying a quiet certainty that is difficult to explain. They are not simply exciting possibilities. They arrive with the unmistakable feeling that they belong to your future. It is almost as though the universe gently places the blueprint for your next chapter into your hands and silently invites you to begin building the life that has been waiting beneath every previous delay. Then July 29th finally arrives, carrying the moment toward which every earlier event has been leading. On this day, the Sun and Jupiter unite in an exact conjunction within Leo, creating one of the most powerful alignments of the entire year. Yet the conjunction itself tells only part of the story. This meeting unfolds within an exceptionally rare geometric arrangement that some astrologers describe as the Baba boat basket. 4 outer planets occupy harmonious positions, forming an intricate energetic structure whose balance and precision create an extraordinary field of cosmic support. The architecture of this alignment is so remarkably synchronized that the potential available during this brief window becomes almost impossible to measure through ordinary understanding. It feels as though every major current in the heavens begins flowing toward the same destination at exactly the same time. Only hours after this conjunction reaches perfection, the full moon rises in Aquarius, illuminating everything that has remained hidden beneath the surface. Suddenly, your community, your wider network, your audience, and the people who quietly observed your journey without speaking begin recognizing what has changed. The work completed during periods of silence no longer remains invisible. The personal growth achieved, while nobody seemed to notice, becomes impossible to overlook. Recognition appears naturally, not because you demanded attention or searched for approval, but because the timing has finally aligned with the truth of who you have become. Validation arrives as a consequence of authentic growth rather than external pursuit. This is why the day carries such extraordinary importance. It is not merely fortunate. It possesses the ability to alter the direction of an entire life, opening possibilities that continue expanding long after the alignment itself has passed. For 3 zodiac signs in particular, These celestial movements combine with remarkable intensity, creating opportunities for dramatic breakthroughs unlike anything they have experienced throughout the rest of the year. While everyone will feel the effects of this powerful sequence, these three signs stand directly within its strongest current, where transformation becomes visible, undeniable, and deeply personal. If your sign belongs to this group, every moment during the coming days deserves your complete attention, because the changes unfolding now have the potential to reshape your future in profound ways. The first sign is Leo. Leo, this period belongs to you in a way that cannot be overstated. During the previous 4 weeks, while the sun traveled through your 12th house, your experience was shaped by themes of isolation, emotional fatigue, hidden preparation, and the uncomfortable feeling of disappearing from view. You may have questioned why your energy seemed to fade more quickly than it could recover. You may have wondered why recognition felt distant despite your continued effort. At times, it may even have seemed as though the world had quietly forgotten your presence altogether. Yet those experiences were never evidence of failure. They represented the closing chapter before your emergence. Today, the sun enters your first house, the house connected with identity, confidence, visibility, and personal authority. The energy surrounding you changes immediately. It is as though every light that had gradually dimmed suddenly shines again. Your natural presence returns with unmistakable strength, and the world begins responding differently because you are no longer standing behind the curtain. This year carries even greater significance because Jupiter has already entered Leo during late June, beginning a 13-month cycle of personal expansion that many astrologers refer to as the Emerald Year. Throughout this cycle, your confidence naturally increases. Your personal magnetism becomes stronger, and opportunities appear with surprising speed. Situations that might normally require months of effort now begin unfolding within days. When the Sun joins Jupiter exactly on July 29th inside your own sign, the result becomes an extraordinary amplification of possibility. Fortune, recognition, personal validation, and long-awaited opportunities converge at the same moment, offering the confirmation you have been seeking for far longer than you may realize. Yet another important influence ensures that this success serves a higher purpose. On July 26th, the South Node enters Leo, reminding you that this chapter cannot be built upon the same patterns that belong to your past. The universe is prepared to place remarkable opportunities before you, but it also asks something in return. You are no longer invited to measure your worth through applause, admiration, or external approval. This new beginning asks you to shine because your authenticity naturally radiates, not because you require recognition to feel complete. That single difference changes everything, because a life built upon genuine self-expression possesses a stability that performance can never provide. The comeback unfolding now is designed to endure precisely because it grows from truth rather than image. The next sign preparing for an extraordinary transformation is Aries. And if you have felt as though an invisible weight has followed you for far too long, you already recognize exactly where this story is about to continue. Aries. There is a reason the past chapter has felt unlike anything you expected, and it reaches far deeper than ordinary setbacks or temporary frustration. Saturn has been occupying your sign, placing steady pressure upon your identity, your confidence, and even your natural instinct to move forward without hesitation. Every decision seemed to require more effort than it should have. Every bold impulse that once came naturally was met with invisible resistance, as though life itself insisted that you pause before taking another step. For someone whose spirit thrives on decisive action, this prolonged season demanded a level of patience that challenged your very nature. It may have felt as though every attempt to gain momentum was interrupted by responsibilities, delays, or circumstances beyond your control. Yet beneath that difficult experience, Saturn was quietly strengthening the foundation beneath every future victory. Now, everything begins to change. On July 26th, Saturn stations retrograde, and with that shift, the pressure that seemed to originate from the outside world begins to ease. The invisible burden that has accompanied your journey starts to dissolve. The restrictions that once defined your daily experience gradually release their hold, allowing you to breathe with a sense of freedom that may feel unfamiliar after so many months of carrying such tremendous weight. The path ahead no longer feels locked behind endless barriers. Instead, it opens before you with a new sense of possibility. At the same time, another remarkable influence begins working in your favor. As the Sun enters Leo, it activates your fifth house, the area connected with romance, creativity, joy, inspiration, and fearless self-expression. After enduring weeks dominated by emotional heaviness and careful restraint, your attention naturally shifts toward experiences that awaken excitement, passion, and genuine happiness. You begin remembering what it feels like to create simply because your heart desires it. You rediscover the courage to express yourself without constantly questioning whether you are being judged. Then, on July 29th, the Sun forms its exact conjunction with Jupiter, creating a harmonious trine that channels extraordinary support directly toward your sign. This flowing connection carries confidence, opportunity, expansion, and remarkable good fortune into the areas of your life connected with love, creativity, and personal fulfillment. Ideas you have quietly developed away from public attention begin attracting the recognition they deserve. Creative work that once seemed overlooked finds the audience it has been waiting for. Romantic possibilities begin unfolding with a level of excitement that may exceed your expectations. Rather than forcing your way into the spotlight through determination alone, you naturally attract attention because your authentic energy becomes impossible to ignore. The warrior within you returns, but not as the impatient version who once rushed into every challenge. This time, your strength is guided by wisdom earned through experience, making your next chapter far more enduring than anything that came before. Sagittarius, your journey has carried a different lesson, yet one no less significant. The previous 12 months asked more of you than you ever expected to give. Jupiter, your ruling planet, spent its time in Cancer, drawing your normally adventurous spirit into emotional territory that demanded caution, reflection, and slower decision-making. For someone whose heart naturally seeks discovery, expansion, and limitless horizons, being required to move carefully through emotional complexity often felt almost unbearable. You were built to explore possibility, yet life repeatedly asked you to wait. You dreamed of movement, while circumstances required restraint. That difficult chapter has now reached its conclusion. Jupiter has entered Leo, another fire sign that naturally resonates with your own energetic nature, allowing your ruling planet to express its strength with renewed confidence and vitality. The difference is immediate. As the Sun also enters Leo, it illuminates your ninth house, the domain associated with philosophy, higher education, spiritual understanding, international opportunities, long-distance exploration, and sharing your truth with a wider audience. This is familiar ground for your soul. The atmosphere surrounding you begins to feel expansive once again, as though you have finally returned to the environment where your deepest gifts can flourish. When the Sun unites with Jupiter on July 29th, a powerful trine forms with your sign, creating opportunities that may seem almost impossible to anticipate. New doors appear where previously there were only walls. Publishing possibilities begin emerging. International relationships and distant connections expand your horizons. Your platform grows. Your audience reaches beyond limits that once seemed permanent. The vision you have carefully protected throughout months of uncertainty finally receives the support, visibility, and momentum necessary to become reality. What existed only as a dream begins transforming into something tangible. You are no longer simply imagining what your future could become. You are actively creating it, and the universe is not merely permitting your progress. It is amplifying it, supplying the circumstances needed for your vision to continue growing far beyond its original boundaries. Yet the significance of this remarkable week extends far beyond these individual events. The energy now entering your life is not temporary. It does not appear for a brief moment, only to disappear without leaving a lasting imprint. Transformations of this magnitude continue unfolding long after the initial alignments have passed. What you are experiencing now represents the opening movement of a much larger evolution that will continue revealing itself in the weeks and months ahead. The full moon rising in Aquarius on July 29th is therefore not an ending. Instead, it opens the next chapter with unmistakable force. Some people will recognize its influence almost immediately. A single conversation may redirect the course of their future. An unexpected opportunity may arrive without warning. A relationship may deepen with surprising speed, revealing possibilities that previously seemed unimaginable. Others will notice the transformation unfolding more quietly. They may wake one morning carrying a confidence they cannot explain. They may suddenly recognize the direction their life is meant to follow with remarkable certainty. They may simply realize that the person who struggled through the beginning of July no longer exists in quite the same way. The emotional burden that once seemed impossible to release gradually disappears. The uncertainty clouding your thoughts gives way to unmistakable clarity. The invisible barriers that kept you feeling small, overlooked, uncertain, or unable to fully express yourself begin collapsing one by one until you realize they no longer possess any power over your future. Yet perhaps the deepest truth of this entire journey is one that many people overlook. None of these experiences have been happening against you. They have been unfolding through you. The universe did not spend 3 weeks surrounding your life with pressure, restriction, emotional testing, and uncomfortable transformation without purpose. Every challenge strengthened something within your character. Every delay refined your judgment. Every disappointment removed another illusion. Every obstacle expanded your capacity to receive what is now approaching. The person emerging from this process possesses greater resilience, clearer vision, deeper wisdom, and far stronger foundations than the version who entered July. That inner transformation is precisely what prepares you for the extraordinary expansion waiting beyond this week. What stands on the other side is not merely the relief of leaving difficulty behind. It is the beginning of a life that may feel so different, you scarcely recognize how far you have traveled. In the weeks ahead, as you look back upon everything that unfolded during this remarkable period, the reasons behind every delay, every lesson, every emotional challenge, and every moment of uncertainty will become unmistakably clear. You will understand that nothing happened without purpose. Every step prepared you for this one. The return you have been waiting for has already begun unfolding, and the momentum now carrying you forward has grown far too powerful to be stopped. Thank you for staying through this journey and sharing these moments together. If this message resonated with you and you would like to continue exploring future astrological insights and spiritual guidance, consider subscribing so you do not miss what comes next. Your support truly means a great deal. I also invite you to share your own experiences and reflections in the comments, because your story may encourage someone else walking a similar path. Until we meet again, take good care of yourself, and I look forward to seeing you in the next journey together.